I'd like to introduce you to Scott Walker, who many of you know. He is very active in the Sister City program, and he is also a historian and a researcher and a tour guide.
Thank you, Catherine, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second in a series of 6 talks honoring the nation's 250th anniversary, but presented by our various sister city organizations. We represent 5 countries, 3 continents, and we're supported strongly by the City of Fredericksburg government. We appreciate that, and there's Brenda Martin back there, who is our liaison. Thank you.
Yes,
You will find around the flyer that talks about all 6 of the lectures. We started last month with my friend John Hennessy, retired National Park historian, just talking about immigration. And as I said at the time, and I'll ask the question tonight, are any of you pure-blooded American Indian? Raise your hand. Then someone in your ancestry came here. And we're talking through our various sister city groups, presenting something from that. Tonight will be our sister city, German sister city. Raise your hand if you're a member of that organization. My gosh, look at that. Thank you. And we have organizations that deal with a French city, the German city, an Italian city, and then we have an African city in Ghana and an Asian city in Nepal. It's a great way to meet people and talk about the countries of the world, but for tonight and 4 more nights, we're trying to say what each of those groups brought to this country. And in an area that has Germana Community College and an area called Germana, guess what tonight's topic is? With that, let me reintroduce, although she was up here first, Catherine, come on up, Catherine Willis. Thank you for being here, and we hope you'll come to the rest of them.
I'm Catherine Willis. I've been active in sister cities here in Fredericksburg for the 40 years that I've been here. Our children have gone abroad through the sister city group. It's been a wonderful experience, and it's my pleasure to give back to the community for all of the experiences that I've had through Sister City. 2 things. Scott showed you the flyer. There's plenty over there on the piano, and I've got more here. But the other thing I want to tell you about is our Italian Sister City is sponsoring, we occasionally, not on a regular basis, but we send artists to Estee for a 3-week period to work and display and perform in the Sister City group, and then we reciprocate by receiving artists here. We are now sending our 3rd artist from Fredericksburg, and that is going to be Sue Henderson, who is here tonight. Please stand. And her keyboardist, Ray Dempsey. They have performed together for 10 years. Sue was for 10 years a vocal director on Carnival Cruise Lines. In addition, she has done gobs and just tons of stuff in this community for the arts and history. She was very active in Stafford Historical Society, etc. The reason I'm telling you this is that we have a flyer here that talks about what they're going to do, but it is also a fundraiser to help support the expenses in this exchange. And the grand prize They do the Great American Songbook. This is Gershwin and Rodgers and Hammerstein, Duke Ellington, and the grand prize is a performance of the two of them at an event of your choice. In addition, Sue is a great photographer. She's going to be doing participating in 2 photography art shows while we were in she is in Estee, and there will also be some of these art photographs awarded at a drawing later on in June. So I'm going to leave this over there on the piano too. Okay, proceed. Tonight is the second in this series, the first specifically about a country, and I would like to introduce Dr. Marcel Rotter, who many of you know as the German professor at Mary Washington. He and his students for many years have been researching the historical influences and settlement of the Germans in the Greater Fredericksburg area. He holds a PhD in German literature from the University of Wisconsin, and he began his German-American studies researching visual propaganda in Germany and Austria, and focused on a comparative study of World War I bond poster propaganda in Germany, Austria, and Great Britain, USA. He is the immediate past president of the International Society for German-American Studies, and is currently working on an edition of German immigrant letters back home during World War I. Cameron Mayfield He is a senior at Mary in the history program at Mary Washington. He focuses on history and German. His goal at this point is to teach history at the secondary level. Caroline Price is an exchange student at UMW, its partner university in Erfurt, Germany. She's studying communications and management and offers conversation hours and tutoring for students in the German program. Evan Sowers is pursuing a cybersecurity major and German language minor. He began his German studies at UMW.
Sorry, guys.
This is my buddy from the library. Erin, whom I just love. I love working with this woman.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, she's great. He began his German, this is interesting. He began his German studies at UMW, and he quickly advanced in proficiency. In turn, he was awarded a 1-month internship in Spetzingen, Germany, which is our sister city, with the mayor's office administration. One more way that we benefit the people in this town. This quiet stuff that happens because of this sister city. I love it. And then Orion. There you go. Orion Dunroy is a senior majoring in history. His focus is on the long 19th century, and I think we all know what that is, as well as World War II, with a focus on military history, memory culture, settler colonialism, and genocide studies. These varied interests largely stem from his parents' experience growing up in apartheid South Africa and his own experience growing up in Austria and studying in the United States. Okay, exciting stuff, huh? So glad to have these students with us. And I give you Dr. Marcel Rotter.
A little bit over here. Can you still hear me?
No.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, so the way this will work, I will talk for about like 20-25 minutes because professors like to talk. And then my students will step in and present their projects that they did during the last semester in a course that was called the German Diaspora. We talked about German immigration, not just to the United States, but also to countries like Russia, within Europe, to South America, and other regions of the world. So before we start, I really want to acknowledge people that are instrumental, made possible what we do. That's a project that has been going on since 2019, and multiple iterations of the course have contributed to it. And first of all, it's Nancy Moore, who was formerly the librarian in the Virginiana room here at the library, who alerted me to a typoscript by Joseph Rokus. I don't know, is he here by any chance? No, okay. Who wrote already in the 90s about the German element in Fredericksburg. So then John Pfeffer from the Institute for Policy Studies, who did interviews, students from the German 485 class from 2019, 2023, 2025, everyone contributed there. Our first oral interview subjects, Doris Mollis, Barbara Myers, Dan Schmidt, Dietmar Weselin, some of them are here. My colleagues, Michael Spencer from Historic Preservation, Jackie Gallagher and Stephen Hanna from Geography, who made it possible that we can use a GIS software for the presentations that we have today. The Central Rappahannock Heritage Center, where I found my materials about Johann Happel. Joanna Catron, the former curator of Belmont, who let us have a view behind the scenes of Belmont. Many of you might know that Gary Melchers was a German-American too. He was fluent in German, taught in Germany. Then Executive Director Tim Sofbin and Archaeology Director Eric Lawson at the Germana Foundation. We have both since left, but hosted us at least twice at the Germana Foundation. And then the German teachers at the AATG Immersion Weekend 2025, who were my first guinea pigs for a walking tour through Fredericksburg on 2 German-American sites, which I would like to offer on the 28th, so not this Saturday, but the following Saturday at 10 o'clock at the university at Combs Hall. If you want to meet there, we can do a little tour of what I have so far. This all is very much a voyage, something, a work in progress. I am not a local historian like some of you are, and I'm happy for new information if you know anything or can direct me to things that are unresolved or not yet known. So, I want to talk to you first about who is German. Then about German immigration to the US, a very short history in like 2 slides. Then Germans in Virginia, talk about Jamestown, Germana, Germans in the 19th century, and then we will focus on research approaches to German immigration, my research, the student research, and then the website that brings it all together, the Germans in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So who is German? So my students know that we started the semester last year with that. So what brings Germans together? Is it the language? But we have quite a diversity of dialects in German. The High German is basically just one dialect that said, I am High German, that's the one around Hanover, and I can go into that a little bit in detail if you are interested. Is it the culture? If you look at differences in folk dresses, architecture throughout Germany. So you have on the left side all the different folk dresses. On the right side you have 2 different houses. There's half-timber houses. On the right side of that is a house in northern Germany, which has a completely different roof structure. So it might not be something that brings German together. Is it the food? So we have a wide variety of foods, no? From Lapskaus, which is a northern German dish, to Flammkuchen, which is eaten in the southwest, as well as actually in Alsace. Tart flambe is named there. So if you look at the map of Germany, that's 1648, that's right after the end of the 30-year war. You see one of the reasons that Germany is so diverse, because for the longest time there were over 300 little principalities, kingdoms, dukedoms, that were part of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. Even in the 19th century, it has not really changed that much. especially here in the center of Germany, that's where I'm from. We have the highest density of castles there because there are all those borders that have to be protected. So every time the border changed, you had to build a new castle to protect that new border. So there are close to 500 castles in Thuringia. Some of them destroyed, but still there's quite a number. So, and many of the people that lived there actually assumed the local identity, not a German identity. You would say of themselves, I am Bavarian, or I am a Württemberger, or I am Prussian. He would not say I'm German. He didn't really define themselves as Germans. What made them Germans were actually who's German, also who's German American. So immigrants from German-speaking lands, no? Do we include Austrians? Do we include Bohemians? Last month, John Hennessy talked about in Fredericksburg there were like 73 Germans plus 3 Bohemians. Well, were they German speaking? Were they part of Germany or not? You know, so those were things that we have Alsatians. Alsace went back and forth between France and Germany for hundreds of years. So are those Germans? Are they not Germans? What about German Americans? Not naturalized citizens, so people that many did not see the need to become naturalized citizens, especially if they lived somewhere in the Midwest and lived on their farm their whole life. There was no need for them to become citizens. How about naturalized citizens? Are they still German? What about their children? How far down in a generation do we go to call them Germans? So those are questions that are not easy to answer, and that's why it is a little bit of a moving target if we talk about Germans and German Americans. So a quick overview about German settlers in America. It just so happens that the very first one was actually here in Virginia, namely Johannes Fleischer from Breslau. He was a biologist, a physician. Back then in the 17th century, those specialties were also quite soft. He came with John Smith to Jamestown, and just as many others dies just a few months later after arrival. So later in the 17th century, about 1630s, we have the glassmakers in Jamestown. 1683 is the much more known Germantown, Pennsylvania founding by Pastorius, who brings a group of Mennonites and Quakers from the Münster area and Krefeld area to Virginia, to Pennsylvania. Sorry. So then later on, you find people on the East Coast and the Midwest, especially in the 19th century. So Germans in Virginia. So we find here one of the earliest settlements besides the one by Johannes Fleischer. We have people from Siegerland. Siegerland is the area around the city of Siegen, here in the center of the map. And if you look at the map, you see it's a quite hilly area. I wouldn't call it mountainous, but a quite hilly area. So if you are in such an area, usually agriculture is not an option because the fields are way too steep and you can't really do any effective agricultural work, at least not if it comes to anything to grow in the ground. If you're lucky, as the people in Siegen were, there's actually stuff in the mountains, and in this case it was iron ore and coal. Out of this, they are becoming then quite industrious miners. Right north of here, outside that map, is actually Solingen. You might know Solingen from its knives. There's a huge museum for table culture where you find all kinds of silverware and pieces of silverware that you never even heard of that you can use at a table. So those are made usually from that iron ore that was found here around Siegen. So a group of them decided to immigrate because there were an explosion of people, an explosion of the number of people that were living there. Still in the 18th century, not everyone had the primogeniture, where the oldest son would inherit the land from the father, but actually the land would be split up between the sons, which then eventually led to some sons having like tiny little fields, which did not really would be enough to feed a family. So he immigrated. So he immigrated to America in 2 waves. The first one came in 1714. The first group of 42 indentured servants. The second group came 1717. Those were 80 people. Apparently the second ship, according to John Hennessy last month, I haven't heard that before, was hijacked by a ship captain, and they were supposed to go to Philadelphia but ended up in Norfolk. He first settled in the south from here before Governor Spotswood had the brilliant idea to bring them to what is today Germana and the Germana Foundation out at the Rapidian River, where they were supposed to look for gold, silver, and iron in that order. And he found exactly the opposite order. He found iron and silver and a little bit of gold. So he were there for their allotted time, 7 years, and then afterwards he would disperse into Madison County, the Shenandoah Valley. You find quite a number of German architecture there, actually. I'm still waiting for that historic preservation student who writes a paper about German architecture in the Shenandoah Valley. So all this continuously operating Lutheran church in the United States was also founded by them. So we don't have any pictures of Germana, how it looked like there. We only have a description, after which then this drawing was made in the 1950s. It was supposed to be a five-corner fort with a wooden house, a solid wooden house in the center that was used for church, but otherwise just for the governor there to live there. So the indentured servants had to live in those little houses here, and here you find the sheds and for storage around it. So around this was a big palisade fence that was supposed to keep out any intruders that were there. Keep in mind, Fort Germana was the only town, if you want to, village maybe, settlement that was not on a shippable river. It was also at that point the furthest, most western part of the British Empire. So that was the furthest out settlement that was there. Okay, so let's move on to Fredericksburg. So you all probably know that map. It's a pretty famous print of Fredericksburg. Was made in 1862, November 1862, by A. Sachse and Company. Formerly, it was attributed to Robert Sneden. In the meantime, we know that Sachse made it in Baltimore. Sachse himself, also a German American. It was printed in 1863 and distributed. The Sachse Company later printed quite a number of pictures from the Civil War that were widely distributed. So one word before we go deeper into Fredericksburg about the connection between Fredericksburg and Baltimore. We find, and you will see that in the students' work too, that there is quite a strong connection between Baltimore and Fredericksburg, more so actually than between Fredericksburg and Washington. It has something to do with transportation. In the 18th and 19th century, Baltimore was much easier to be reached by ship than Washington was to be on foot or on horse. So there were regular ship connections between Fredericksburg and Baltimore. Baltimore was, of course, one of the big immigrant ports where many of the immigrants initially settled and then moved on, and those who came south often came to Fredericksburg. So Fredericksburg was therefore a secondary immigration city that had business opportunities that were not there in Baltimore anywhere. If everyone settles there who just arrived, after a while, certain businesses are just satiated and can't have any sales anymore. So many came down. So by 1860, we had 71 Germans in Fredericksburg, plus 3 Bohemians. That was what was said. 72 Irish. Okay. So as I said, who's German? You know, were those 3 Bohemians very German-speaking, very Czech-speaking? You know, it's not indicated in the census, so we don't know about that. So the German society, the German community here in Fredericksburg was quite industrious. Many of them were merchants. A German school was built, actually, not built, but organized. It met in a building that was supposedly the orphanage of the Presbyterian Church. And there I would actually solicit the help of the local historians. I don't know where that is, so maybe somebody can tell me at some point. Okay, then the Germans also organized a German building society. A German building society, we have something similar also in Washington. There were a number of those also organized by the Germans. Was something similar to a German Raiffeisenbank. And a Raiffeisenbank is something that gives agricultural credits, that also gives you money to build a home, and most importantly here in Fredericksburg, especially after the Civil War, they also lent to African Americans, which other banks would not. The German Building Society was for the founders also an investment. They clearly also had the objective to make money from it. That's nobody discusses that. And we have here das Geld des Dorfes dem Dorfe, so that's the Raiffeisen motto that came from Germany. It was organized actually in '68 and was supposed to only last for 5 years. It lasted a little bit longer, I think, but it was then dissolved afterwards. So, not part of the German community was the German dance. Just saying that here, and I will go into that in a second. Okay, so the German school was also founded in '68. So Virginia Herald carried a short story about the Germans in Fredericksburg wanting to organize an, quote, educational establishment in which both the German and the English languages are to be taught. So Germans were organizing a fair at Armory Hall about the 12th of May, when they trust their efforts will be seconded by the people of Fredericksburg in a liberal patronage. The article went on to say that the Germans excel in this line, and we have no doubt it will be the most magnificent fair ever held in this section of history. At this point, had a very good reputation. I remember, I just remind everyone of Friedrich Fröbel. That's the one that basically started the kindergarten movement, and the wife of Karl Schurz, who was Minister of Inner Affairs for the United States. She was the one who founded actually the first American kindergarten in Wisconsin in Watertown. So, going on the school. So the Fredericksburg Lecture on August 7th then reported, the German citizens have been engaged in a movement for several months towards starting an educational establishment in Fredericksburg, cheap in form but thorough in its operations, in which both English and German will be taught. It is modeled, we understand, after similar institutions in Baltimore, and strikes us as feasible in its several parts. We believe one of the articles of organization provides that all scholars shall be taught in both languages. The orphan asylum belonging to the Presbyterian Church will, in all probability, be selected as the place of instruction. As Teutonic energy is fully enlisted, the scheme will undoubtedly prove a success. So, what really sticks out here is a multiple underlining that both languages will be taught. That the school will not be something that will segregate the Germans from the rest of society in Fredericksburg, but that everyone will be fully incorporated here. So, about the German Building Association, we also have some news. In '68, the Freelance Star reported that at its organizational meeting, a constitution and bylaws were adopted, and the following were elected as officers, trustees, and directors. So, E.L. Heinichen, I think you will talk about him, no? Okay, good. Was the president, C. Barlosius, F. Baumann, R. Kaiser, R. Hirsch, C. Miller, E. Stoffregen, kann jemand Stoffregen sagen? Okay. W. Lange, Kahle, Krüger, Brulle, and Goldsmith and Nachman. Brulle was a very prominent family here, especially for milling. So the association intended not to cater to the German community exclusively, because 1/3 of the stock of 300 shares was made available to others than Germans. Okay. So, then he also went so far as to build an immigration society. The Fredericksburg Lecture reported that in November '68, it all happens in '68. Okay, a committee met in the mayor's office to organize an immigration society, and the committee members insisted that it was folly for the people of this section to delay any longer putting forth some effort to secure a portion of the tide of immigration now sweeping by us. It appointed a group of men who were to pursue securing a suitable agent or agents in our community who shall go over to Germany and induce immigrants to come directly to Fredericksburg and the country contiguous. So, in the 1970s, you will see Germany experienced after the founding of the German Reich under the new Emperor Wilhelm and the architect of that, Bismarck. After the 2 years of very high industrial growth, there was all of a sudden a crisis, economic crisis, and people were losing their jobs, especially because of the industrialization. Many people from the countryside did not have a chance to work anymore in their traditional jobs, especially if they were manufacturing in the traditional way, making a table from scratch or things like that. A plant could now do those tables, like probably 5 of them a day. That would take them a week. So many of them lost their jobs and made their way to America. And the German, the Immigration Society was the one who wanted to kind of basically harvest those people and bring them here because they were good people and would be useful. Let's settle it once and for all, the German ball. Okay, so in the 19th and 20th century, American social life, the German often meant a cotillon-style dance or ball, a structured social dance with figures, favors, and games. It's not necessarily an event run by or for German immigrants. So this is a German ball. Okay, so it was held here in Fredericksburg. The last mention we have was from 1948. So I don't know if it ever happened, but I read in the chronic of the university that it moved on, the organizers moved on to Richmond and organized it there later on. There was also a German ball here at the university, back then, Mary Washington College. That was also like in the 50s last held. So it went out of favor. Let's talk about that. Fredericksburg, we cannot talk about anything without mentioning the Civil War. So there is among German-American scholars, I would call it the myth that all German Americans were against slavery. This is not true, as we can see in Fredericksburg. So Germans here owned very small amount of enslaved people, but still, it were 2, and it was Horkamp was one who owned 1 enslaved person and 2 children, and there was another one who was a leather maker. So volunteers for the military probably were due to social pressure. I mean, if you live in a society like here, you were pressured to volunteer for the army that is in your region. However, some did not want to be exchanged once they were POWs and swaps and wanted to stay actually with the Union instead of being exchanged and go back to the Southern Army. So we have here a couple of those people and where they went. It was mostly the 30th Virginia Infantry Regiment, as you can see if you go down, and they all became their members, 61, 62, some 64, okay? So, interesting is how they went into the army. So here we have a couple, those are not all of them, no? Just a couple, and I tried to figure out, so did he go voluntarily, were he drafted, or did he go to the Union? No? And so we have that here, so Reins, Stoffregen, Kaiser, Lange, so that's 4 out of them, you know, went voluntarily to the Southern Army. Those 2, Heuer and Heinichen, were drafted, and Heuer later on, once he was actually captured, did not want to go back to the South, he wanted to stay with the Union Army. There's also in Rokus's typoscript, there's also a lengthy story about somebody from Spotsylvania who actually refused to become a member of the Southern Army and escaped 3 times those people that tried to catch him and put him in the army, and then he gave up. Okay, our brush with greatness. Okay. So I don't know if you know, but Sandra Bullock's mother, Helga Bullock, was actually an opera singer, and she actually taught at Mary Washington College Voice for a couple of years, and so that's our brush with greatness. So, and you can actually, here we have a little clip, Sandra Bullock receiving a prize in Germany, and you can hear her actually speak in German, accent-free. So I hope that will. Oh, there it is. Oh.
Mensch, bin ich nervös, weil da drüben auf dem Boden liegt meine Sprache. Okay, in was für großartigen Zeiten wir leben, weil irgendwann war ich mal Kellnerin, dann war ich Putzfrau, dann war ich Disco-Tänzerin, dann war ich Hundefriseuse. Wer hätte gedacht, dass all diese Berufe mich eines Tages auf diese Bühne führen würden? Aber das ist das beste Beweis dafür, weil dass das Publikum heutzutage so tolerant ist, dass sogar Leute wie ich eine Chance haben. Meine Mutter hat immer zu mir gesagt, sei originell, Sandra, und das hat mich als Kind total verrückt gemacht, aber jetzt verstehe ich es, weil meine Mutter war ihrer Zeit voraus. Und Gott sei Dank hat sie mir das Mentalität vermittelt, bevor sie selbst in andere Welten entschritten ist. Also danke, Dr. Burger, danke, meine Familie, danke, Caroline, Christina, Gabriela, Barbara, Maxi, geh jetzt ins Bett. Tante Christel, Onkel Heinz, danke. Danke alle.
Okay, so that's brush with greatness here. So those of you who speak German probably heard that she was quite accent-free. Okay, good. So let me talk about our Fredericksburg German-American project. It started out with a class, German 485, the German diaspora. I taught it in 2019 and 23 and 25. We started out in the first 2 years with conducting oral interviews with German Americans that are living amongst us. And I mentioned some of them. Okay. They are on our website. And this year, actually, I wanted to use ArcGIS. That's a GIS application that you can use actually maps and show how people move actually within the world. So our point of departure was Joseph Rokus's typoscript. It's here in the Virginiana room. Everyone can see it there. On Fredericksburg German Heritage. The Germans in Fredericksburg, Virginia, at the time of the Civil War. So it's kind of just a short flash, focus on the time of the Civil War. There still needs to be research done on what happened before that, what happened afterwards. I tried to start something, you will see that later, on somebody who came here in the 20th century. So that was our point of departure. So I gave the students this type of script to read. It's like how much long was it? Like 100 pages long, approximately. 120 was it? Okay. So it's quite. It's pretty good. Yeah. So even though occasionally there is some quotation missing, so what? So it's a good start to do it. So additional resources used were, of course, the census, Fredericksburg newspapers, the city cemetery. If you go, was a cemetery, and the old city cemetery that is next to the Confederate cemetery. You find quite a number of gravestones with German names on. Okay, so let me go and let my students present some of those people. Those are examples of German Americans that lived here in Fredericksburg in the 19th century. So this is the same that Catherine Harris already read to you, so this is nothing new here, and I just hope now that we go back to your stuff. Okay, so John Huppel, some of you might know the name Huppel. His son Ralph Huppel was later on a historian here for the National Park Service. He died, now I'm blanking on that, I think in the 2000s, in the early 2000s. John Huppel was also father from Ralph Huppel. There's a big collection, since Ralph Huppel was a historian, he kept everything from his father and about himself. The collection at the Old Morris School, at the Heritage Center. So we have letters, postcards, envelopes, photographs, other materials that you will see in a second. So the Ralph Huppel collection is massively bigger. So he really documented his own life. We have everything from his elementary school report cards up to his BA. So he really kept everything. So, but back to John Huppel. So he was born in Speckswinkel. That was, according to the documents, in Hesse-Darmstadt, but actually is closer to Marburg and should be actually in northern Hesse. So there's some little mystery there why it was Hesse-Darmstadt. So he immigrated 1893 to Baltimore, so he was just 19 years old when he immigrated. As I said earlier, the connection to Baltimore is quite strong. And got citizenship in Fredericksburg. Back then, citizenship was actually locally done, not on the federal level. And so it's on a website. So he married Margarete Reiser, and he had a number of children: Helena, Ralph, Roland. Okay. So this is an interesting document because something like that we don't have in the United States. So it's a so-called Walzbuch. You have to go after you finish learning for a job, after you were an apprentice and you are done apprenticing. You had to go on a waltz, on a walk, on a hike for 3 years. You were not allowed to be closer to your hometown than 50 kilometers. You had to go for 3 years and 1 day. You had to carry everything that you had with you, and you had to go to other handyman masters of their craft and learn further there. You were not allowed to use any paid transportation. You could hitchhike. Some people these days, it's still done today actually, these days some people go and surf on ships actually to go transcontinental somewhere else. I just saw the German embassy in Australia actually posted some picture of some Quilt Rotter, they were called, that made it all the way to Australia. There. So, and you have to continue learning their craft. Okay, good. Okay. Well, now I want to finish. Now we are. Coming, yeah, yes. No, great. So, and we have actually the stamps. It was set up here. You see it on the bottom. In 18, well, I have only a very small picture here. I can't really read it. 1891, yep. And then you have the stamps from the different cities where he was. He had in each city, he had to learn under a master. In this case, he was a tailor, a master tailor, for at least 6 months before he could go to the next city. So this was his waltz. He did not finish it. He only went on his waltz for 1 year. 91 to 92. He got married in 93. That might have something to do with that. And then immigrated right afterwards to the United States. So he might have not seen a future in Germany for him as a tailor. So here he is in his young years, probably even during that time of his waltz. So he came then to Fredericksburg, first to Baltimore, where he operated a tailor, and then came to Fredericksburg, where he continued to be a tailor, but also operated a clothing shop. So he would have ready wear also in his assortment. Advertisements from that time tell about his wares that they are very exclusive and can rival with the ones in Washington and in Baltimore, and you wouldn't find anything like that even in Richmond. So it was pretty high end. So his wife Margarete Reiser-Happel was from Bavaria, so he might have met her on his waltz there, and she died in 38. Oops. So, we talked in the class about a couple of interesting things, like this postcard. I think it's a postal novelty. What you see is a brother-in-law is writing him a postcard, and it says, Herrn John Johann Happel, Damen und Herren Konfektion, so ladies and gentlemen confection, wares. Fredericksburg, Virginia. So, and then we have stamps from Copenhagen there. Why? Anyone has an idea?
That's how the mail came?
No, it didn't have to go. It could go right to Bremen and off on a ship to America. What did he not write in his address? USA, he didn't write. So that postcard went to Fredericksburg with O in Denmark, where he thought it should go because there is no USA on it, no? And everyone is writing on it, you know. So that blue pen there then finally corrected it after everyone wrote there is no such person here. So, and that's how it ended up then finally here in the United States. So that's the house he most likely came from. That's the Happel family of Speckswinkel. It's labeled, it says like Großmutter, grandmother on top there, she's looking out the window. And then Dorothea, Heinrich, Clara, Mutter, Vater, on the bottom. So I couldn't really read the Dorothea, so I put it on a Facebook website for old German handwriting. And all hell broke loose because he accused me of having that AI created, that postcard, because those shadows of the people in the forefront they were different than the house. So it was quite an experience, I have to say. I said, I don't want to discuss that, I just want to have the first name deciphered. So it was quite interesting. It exists like it is in the archive. Okay, so this house still stands today. You see a picture of further away. It's the Happel house, so it's close to a little pond. here. And this is, I don't think it's the same house, but it's in the same place. And it was operated until the early parts of the 20th century. It was founded in 1905 as a grocery store and was operated by the Head family, and the last one who operated was Anneliese Head, which was a born Happel. So the Happel family was still there in the 20th century in Specksville. Okay, so that's the house here in Fredericksburg where he lived, and it's a tailor shop. It's right next to the antique mall there. It has those candles there today. Candle. Okay. Do you still exist? I don't know. Okay. That, according to the Heritage Center, is also a house that he owned. I'm not so sure about that, but more research is needed, as we said. Okay, so far about the Happel. Now we come finally to the student research. So let me close that and we switch computers.
All right, so good evening, guten Abend. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the evening so far, apart from all the technical hiccups, but you know, it happens to all of us. The thing fails just in the last minute when you need it the most. But we're here now. So what I'll be presenting to you today is the Eva family. So we had a range of families to choose from and do some research on, most of which have Josef Rokus had already done for us, so shout out to him. But in my case, I chose the Eva family. Now, the Eva family, with regards to the other German Americans who lived in Fredericksburg, or Germans who lived in Fredericksburg, they are kind of inglorious, so to speak. There's no physical trace that remains of them, and really they didn't have many descendants that survived throughout the years. To preface, the Ebert family began with 3 brothers coming from Prussia over to America. August, Henry, and William. Presumably, Henry's German name is Heinrich, and he just changed it to Henry to come up as more English or American. William, Wilhelm, August, you don't really need to change because it's Latin anyways. But yes, so the 3 brothers came from the region of Prussia. I don't know specifically where in Prussia, because Prussia is 2 sides of Germany all at once. But they at least immigrated to America, and at some point settled in Fredericksburg before the Civil War. Now, here's where the timeline gets a little bit funky, because Henry is the guy who gets all of the glory in all the research that I've done. His brothers, August and William, are almost relegated to footnotes, but it is presumed that all 3 brothers moved to Fredericksburg, and all 3 brothers ran a grocery store before the Civil War broke out. And it's presumably William and August were at the same time doing their own thing, or they were either hovering around the older brother, the oldest brother, Henry, who was able to situate himself more quickly and more successfully than his other 3 brothers. And when Henry then came to America, he then also, I believe, he brought with his fiance, or would marry his wife here in the States. His wife's name was Sophia, and together they had 2 children, Dorothea, otherwise known as Dorothy, and Mary, who were born very shortly before the Civil War in 1857 and 1859 respectively. And apart from that, the Eberts ran the grocery store as a family unit, and as a matter of fact, the grocery store, who here has walked down Sunken Road before? Yeah, go figure. So if you were to walk down on the gravel path, right below Brompton House, like right in front of the memorial dedicated to the Confederate soldier who gave water to all of the Union troops after the battle, the Ebert grocery store was located right on that ridge. Now, it stood there for over a century before being torn down in the 1950s, but that is where the Eberts based themselves on. Now, this is the site that it is today. This would have been the site as seen back in the day. And here's also a little reconstruction of what it would have looked like, or where the house would have been situated. Shout out to Peter Dia, who did that for us. Now, why was this a problem that the Ebert House was right on Sunken Road? Because Sunken Road is where the Confederate defenses were situated when the Union Army crossed the Rappahannock. So shortly before the battle happened, let's see if we can zoom in here. Yeah. Shortly before the battle happened, the family was evacuated because, of course, a big battle was about to take place. And the Confederates were famously, of course, dug in on Sunken Road, while the Union troops tried to move all across the town and then, of course, up the hill. Famously, it was a slaughter, and a lot of shooting was going on, which utterly devastated the Ebert House. You can still see some pockmarks on the still standing house, or structure from that era, which is just located just below the Ebert House down here. If you look on the inside of the house, you can still see pockmarks and bullet holes from the battle that took place, over a century ago. The Ebert House looked exactly like that, but the outside facade was destroyed, the inside was destroyed. Basically, the whole house was a wreck. Henry himself was conscripted into the Confederate Army, but his army career was also very inglorious. He suffered 2 sicknesses throughout his career in the army, and most of his convalescence was spent in and around Richmond. And he never really saw combat, which, all of his sicknesses may have been a blessing in disguise, because he never had to see combat. Meaning that once the war was over, he could return to Fredericksburg without having suffered an amputated limb or having lost his life. And for the rest of the century, let me see here. Yeah, for the rest of the century, Henry and his family ran the grocery store, and really not much of note happened to them afterwards, which is probably a good thing, because you don't want to have a lot of drama happening in your life. So, the family ran the store as a family unit until Henry himself passed away in 1896. Then Sophia ran the grocery store and her own junk shop somewhere in town until her own death in 1930. Now, interestingly, both daughters, Dorothea and Mary, never married. And instead, the 2 of them ran the family store after both parents had passed away. Dorothea would eventually pass away in 1930. And after that, Mary, presumably because she just had no more living family in Fredericksburg, moved to Richmond in 1944, where she would ultimately also pass away. So the entire family came from Germany, stayed here for a while, but ultimately both daughters never married, and they both died childless. So that would be the end of the Ebert family. Now, however, the only real physical trace left of them is their graves in the Confederate cemetery just up the street. Henry, Sophia, and their 2 daughters are all buried next to each other in the Confederate cemetery. But again, because, not to say that they didn't die of note or that they weren't people of note, but because there just weren't any people to take care of, any heirloom they would have left behind, the gravestones there are debilitated to say the least. I myself visited it and I could barely make out the names, and of course it's covered in moss and it hasn't been very well taken care of, which is unfortunate because, they lived here and they died here as a whole family. But ultimately that is the story of the Ebert family. Very average Joey if you would ask me, but I mean, what else could you ask for, honestly?
All right, hello, I'm Cameron, and I will be presenting over Edward Heineshan and his wife Clementine. All right, so from kind of Orion's story of like the average Joe immigrant family, we get a kind of very affluent upbringing family that came over from Hanover. Edward and his wife were born sometime between 1814 and 1824. As Herr Rotter already previously showed, he was the president of the German Building Association. So clearly not a man that, was down on his luck when he came over here. Let me see here, I don't know if it shows it. Oh, that's the German text. If you really want to read German, you can. So he and his wife immigrated in 1852 when he was at the age of 28. He worked a variety of odd jobs. I would presume they came over here with a lot of money because they opened up a business when they did move over here. His wife also worked a lot of odd jobs, primarily as a tutor, tutoring in German, French, and music, which are not subjects that somebody would be able to tutor in if they came from a poor upbringing. The work that Rokas didn't really focus on the wife or the family at all. I would presume because Edward was so rich and he was such an affluent landowner, all of the physical media and legal documents that survive left primarily are coming from him. His wife and his family probably did not undertake a lot of the day-to-day minutia that he did. So his family lived on the 400 block of Princess Anne in Fredericksburg. I don't know if there's any local, area historians that can tell me where that is now. I tried to find the exact location, but it was kind of unclear because in a lot of the works and a lot of the documents that would refer to where they lived, it just referred to that they were the opposite of another business or another person's abode. So it didn't really help me figure out where he was at all. He would go into collaboration with Spindle, W.W. Spindle. I wasn't really able to find out a lot about that person, but they would open a very successful general goods and grocery store on the corner of Main and Commerce Street, which I don't think Commerce Street exists anymore today. William Street, thank you. See, I'm not the greatest local historian. He also presided over the committee of German immigrants and would help to bring emigrating immigrants from Germany, primarily northern Germany, over to Fredericksburg. So we see a lot of legal documents around this time during the prior to the Civil War, 1860s era, of the multiple different properties that Heinischen owned. He owned a farmhouse in Spotsylvania. He owned, I think, 2 or 3 businesses in downtown, and then he owned some other property on the northern side of the river, which obviously came to a head when the Civil War started, because he was seen as a very prominent figure within the local community. At the outbreak of the war, he attempted to form a sort of volunteer militia, which did not go very well. And his family ended up having to flee Fredericksburg as Union troops came closer and closer, through which they would move to Charleston during the proceedings of the war. During this time, Heinischen would get drafted, actually, as I believe would be equivalent to like a sergeant nowadays, due to his age, because at this point in the war, a lot of the draftees were younger boys and they needed kind of like an older man figure. So he did fight for the Confederacy. It didn't say if he saw any active combat during his time, but his family lived in Charleston during the course of the war, in which they would actually file a legal suit to try to recuperate some of the losses that had occurred to their property during the war. They would lose the suit. Nobody, of course, following the war, nobody was really willing to take up the suit, and he spent most of his time in Richmond until February of 1865, in which his family would return to Fredericksburg. One thing that I saw that was interesting about him was that prior to leaving Fredericksburg, he was the victim of 2 arson attacks in 1872 and 1873, so back to back. His family had become wildly successful following the Civil War. They helped with loaning out money to new homeowners and stuff like that, so they had accrued a lot of wealth. I think he was in the top 5 most wealthy men in Fredericksburg at this time, so he was up there, which would obviously put a target on his back, which would lead to his kind of bad blood ending, which I would say, in which in 1873, after the second arson attack, which through the legal proceedings, it didn't really say why or who did it, it just kind of seemed like a random targeted attack. He would move back to Baltimore until his ultimate death in 1913. I tried to find more information about the lives of his wife and his 3 daughters, but I don't think a lot of historians were very interested in following the lives of women of the 19th century, so they kind of fizzle out into dust. The Freelance Star did write an obituary about him, which I thought was pretty interesting, but that was about it. That followed his death. Yeah, that's all about Heinrich.
Hello everyone, I'm Caroline. I have to say I'm a bit nervous. I never spoke in my life in front of so many people in English, so please forgive me. But I'm happy to be here and introduce you to the Hirsch family. Scrolling on to the English part. So the Hirsch were one of the many Jewish families that immigrated from Germany to the US in the 19th century. They tried to escape the growing anti-Semitism and finding new economic opportunities here.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Can you
move the microphone?
Like this? Is it better?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so as I said, they try to escape the growing anti-Semitism and find a new economic opportunity as well as their right to practice their religion freely. So their journey led them from South Germany, from Baden to Fredericksburg, Virginia. The man, his name is Kaufmann. It's not really a first name. It's just means like merchant, but I couldn't find his like actual name. They just referred as merchant. So Kaufmann Hirsch and his wife Hannah and their 7 kids decided to in 1856 to immigrate to America. They arrived in Boston like many other immigrants, and at that time they moved to Baltimore. As we said, it's like pretty popular. Here we have a little map. So, I'm sorry, yeah. So the merchant Hirsch, he was born in Edenstein, Baden-Württemberg, and his wife Hannah is from the other way around, but he's from Heidelberg and she was from Edenstein. They both met in Baden-Baden and got their children there. From there they moved like with the ship up the Rhine and moved over to America all the way to Boston. And then their journey went here, Baltimore. I'm sorry. To Baltimore. First the family started as peddlers. Kaufmann Hirsch traveled from farm to sell like simple goods. And then the family got their 8th child in America in Fredericksburg. And they In 1860, the family had permanently settled in Fredericksburg and lived at 163 Hanover Street. I think I have a picture here. At that time, they also opened their first grocery store in William Street. And like after 2 years already, the sons, David and Simon, took over the family business, and the store was named Simon Hirsch and Bro. They were specialized in textiles and household goods and became well known in the area, and the family got into the society and was well respected. Then, with the beginning of the Civil War, it brought great challenges for the family. The store was destroyed and their house was used as a hospital, so it took some time for them to get everything rebuilt and restored after the war. But they did it, and the old Kaufman and his wife Hannah moved back to Baltimore and retired there. So the sons took over the business completely and expanded it. So the store was located later in 501 Commerce Street, now William Street, with the name Wholesales and Retail Merchant. Over here. Later on, David's son took over. His name was also Simon, like his uncle, and the store was named David Hirsch and Son. In 1941, unfortunately, he died as well, and he took over the entire family business until 1957. He closed down the whole family store at that time. I'm not sure why. There's no information about that. But yeah, after a long decades, the family business was closed, and Simon Hirsch died in 1959. But yeah, he was not only a merchant in the city, he was also on the city council and was a US Navy veteran. So the family not only contributed to the city economic, but also to the immigration of like the Jewish traditions and the community. Because as you see down here, David Church was one of the thriving forces to create the first Jewish synagogue in Fredericksburg, what is today the, I think, the Korean church. But it's still there, and he was one of the ones like actively building it and support the Jewish community in Fredericksburg.
Everybody, my name is Evan, if you did not catch it earlier, and I'm going to talk about this name, I'm going to pronounce it as Wisner. It was probably Visner, it might have been Wiesner. There were like 8 different names, they really couldn't figure out one. I'm guessing it was an issue of... I'm guessing it was an issue of anglicization of the names once they got here. But let me open this extremely convoluted map, because this family had a proclivity to be about anywhere in the world except Fredericksburg. So I do apologize that this will be extremely hard to follow. I will not be going over all of these, but yes. We will be beginning in Hesse, or Hessen, at Hessen. Some of you may know this place. Some of you may be familiar with this place. But they were 2 siblings, a brother, Henry, and a sister, Mary. I could not find if these were their birth names or if these were the names they decided to take once they got to America. But they were born in 1842 and 1845 or 6. I couldn't find the exact details. As Cameron earlier pointed out, the 19th century historians were not overly interested in the lives of most of the women, unfortunately. So despite most of this family being women, there is very little information, unfortunately. Going back over to this mess, they arrive in Baltimore in 1859. And at the time, this was antebellum Civil War. This was an extremely tense period of American history. And while I could not find any information on if Henry or Mary picked sides in the war, I can tell you that they were there for the 6-year duration. And during this time, Mr. Visner, Henry, found a wife by the name of Mary Michael, who he would marry in 1865. He had a brief stint in Richmond, Virginia, where he would live there for a few months before properly moving to Fredericksburg, and he would move and spend pretty much the rest of his life in 819 Main, Caroline Street, which I believe now is that the Backyard Gallery. It's in the same little area as the Soup and Taco, and I want to say it's Abner B's, the ice creamer. So, yeah, they get there, and the 1870 census states that there are 2 kids, Charles at age 3 and Christina of age 1. 1880, they have 2 more kids, 2 daughters. So there's an oldest son and 3 daughters. And Henry's whole thing was he was a shoemaker. And he was very good at this. It might be hard to find in this, but there are various advertisements and postings from the Freelance Star basically saying that this guy is about the best man in the city and within 100 miles to get shoes from. And so, let me see if I can find one of these. Because it's also an interesting tidbit that I noticed, possibly reflective of his German heritage in the way that he writes the advertisement. An interesting linguistic convention of German, for those who do not know, that is seldom seen in most modern languages, is the common capitalization of every noun, not just proper nouns or at the beginning of sentences, the way we are familiar with in English. I believe it was, yeah. So this is the quote. This was originally written in English, and this is from 1894. Come and see my well-selected stock of fall and winter boots and shoes for gents, ladies, misses, and children. Men's heavy boots at all prices to suit the times. Work warranted to give satisfaction. My stock of misses and children's shoes cannot be surpassed for style and workmanship. Fair dealing. Good goods for little money. Henry Vissner, 819 B Street, opposite Miss Tompkins' millinery store. So you may notice that yes, there's a lot of capitalization here. I cannot find definitively if this is more the result of a journalistic convention, wherein a lot of non-prepositional words are capitalized, or if this is the result of his German heritage taking over and capitalizing the vast majority of noun words. But later on, this place, in 1898, following earlier trends, blessed be to the 19th century Fredericksburg Fire Department, there was a fire that occurred at this residence. This was not an arson attack, but was the result of an accident. Poor Henry was at this point in his 50s. He had to actually be rescued by ladder from the second story of his building. To my understanding, Henry, his wife, nor any of his 4 kids were harmed. But I just found this as an interesting footnote. But in later on, Mary Michael will die, the woman that he married in Baltimore. And he actually remarries at the age of 58 in 1900 to a woman by the name of Nanny Flippo. An interesting thing happens among the sisters of the Flippo family, wherein, and I'll get to this later on, his son, his oldest son, Charles, actually marries the younger sister. So an interesting thing happened where the father married the older sister, and 6 years later, his son is marrying the younger sister. I am not entirely sure what the logistics of this work, but hopefully it wasn't overly complicated. But until he died, Henry Vissner was well known in his community for his shoemaking ability. The obituary goes into great depth about his skill and what he contributed to the community. But he will die in 1914. He loved his work until the end. In May of 1914, he was reportedly still working, and he was not happy when he was finally hospitalized for his condition. It was simply listed as lingering illness for cause of death. I could not find anything more specific, but he died at a pretty old age, doing what he enjoyed. He had 4 kids who were all successful, of whom I will get into now. But what I will say, he had a stay-at-home wife and 4 kids he was raising, all of whom their years were not far apart. He sent all 4 of them abroad to the University of Leipzig. His son even got a PhD, which I must say is extremely impressive on a shoemaker's salary. But Charles, the oldest son, was by far the most documented, from what I could tell, especially given his role in Fredericksburg. I will state once again, his family did not really like to stay in Fredericksburg. But he was everywhere. He got his PhD at Leipzig, as I previously mentioned. He attended Yale. He attended the Union Theological Seminary in New York, and he graduated from Hampton-Sydney College. I'm not entirely sure the exact order, but that's a whole lot more than I'll like in the church. His family was deeply involved in the Presbyterian Church, both locally as well as all throughout the nation, which is where a lot of these in the Midwest come from. He was, and I believe this is in order, he was a pastor in Iowa. He was the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia, and he was ordained minister of a Presbyterian church in New Jersey. He was actually so beloved and so dedicated to his church duties that his congregation pretty much told him, "You will take your wife on a vacation to Europe, and we will pay for it." Wow. Which, I must say, wish that could happen to me. So it is finally here, it is now 1895, that he finally lands back in Fredericksburg after being all over the place. And yeah, well, he briefly visited, I should say. He was once again, he moved to Chicago, and his pay was actually doubled while he was there, from $2,000 to $4,000. I am not entirely sure what that amounts to in modern American money, but I will say a doubling of pay at any point in history is never something to complain about. Despite his duties within the church, he actually, during the outbreak of the Spanish-American War, went to go fight in the Philippines. He started, which is where this very long line is, he fought in Cebu City, and he was He first served in a more ceremonial unit, focusing more on parades and morale within the nation. But later on, would actually engage with insurgents within the city. And while I could not find specific details, he actually did get a pension for being wounded or sick at some point during his service. But he returns to Fredericksburg and actually stays there. And at 819 Caroline Street, the exact or Main Street at the time, the same place as his father, he actually founds a, I guess, vocational school. He founds like a business school, and he teaches men, is labeled as both men and women, which I suppose is rather progressive at the time. And they were, I believe in his obituary, they speak greatly of how much this contributed locally. But he pretty much does this until he dies. He had a few wives at this point. His first wife, Charles's first wife, died actually very young, at only 23. They'd only been together a year and a half. He also divorced his second wife in 1904. But in 1906, this is when we get back to the Flippos, of whom he married the younger sister of. And I must say, did they meet because of this, or is this by chance? But that's what I couldn't find any results on, but really wanted to find out. The 1910 to 1911 city directory shows his residence as 112 Main Street or Caroline Street. I'm not exactly sure what that is now, but I do find it interesting that 819 Caroline Street, that used to be the upper level was where they lived, and the lower level was where the business was. But now they're all the way living down here, and this building is solely dedicated towards the school now. And in 1919, only 5 years after his father's death, actually, he would pass due to a heart attack. I believe his obituary is here. Yes. Mr. Wisner was a man of fine intellect and highly educated. He spoke and taught many languages. He has traveled extensively and was a great reader. Mr. Wisner filled a position in the community which will be hard to fill. Many young men and women owing their success in the business world to the training they received at his school. He frequently occupied pulpits, speaking at churches in this section when they were without a pastor. And that is more or less his legacy. I could not find any records of children from him, despite his having been married at most points in his life. Then we get to the daughters. Unfortunately, there were 3 of them, but it is more or less a footnote. There was very little mentioned of them. What I will say is all of them, I'll say one of them I couldn't find anything about actually, but the other 2 were very successful as teachers throughout the South. Like one of them taught at Christina, who was the oldest of the daughters, was a teacher in Arkansas, North Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri, and is a professor at Columbia University. Again, possibly owed due to her father's fervent belief in great education for his kids. She was highly and very well educated abroad in Leipzig. And she would die in South Carolina. I think part of the reason why there's less information on the daughters is that most of them actually did not do a lot of, most of them moved out of Fredericksburg and did things elsewhere. And so the documents just kind of stopped following them after that point, because most of the information was gotten from the Ropus document, which focused more on the specific city. And Henrietta was a teacher in Raleigh for the Peace College. She was listed as one of 6 instructors here. Yeah, at a place that was referred to in the Freelance Star as one of the finest seminaries for young ladies in the South. And she lived at the time of Charles's death in Greenville, South Carolina. And I'm not entirely sure what happened to her after this, but this is as far as I can trace their family. To what I could tell, none of them had kids, and so this was and the Wisners.
Thank you very much. I won't keep you any longer. So it went a little bit over time. I apologize for the technical issues. Yeah, follow us along on the website if you want to see more about the German Americans in Fredericksburg developing. It will be a work in progress. Have more over the years. Okay, thank you very much.